Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Good morning, everyone. It is 11 o'clock Central Time in Sioux Falls. This meeting of the Sioux Falls Board of Ethics is called to order, and I would ask the clerk to read the roll.
Sue Roust.
Here.
Jack Marsh.
Here.
Jeff Winalski is absent today. Greg LaFollette.
Here.
Wanda Harris. Here.
There is a quorum present with 4 out of 5 board members, so we shall proceed. The first item of business is approval of the meeting minutes from our meeting on July 25th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as submitted?
Move for approval as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any changes or corrections? All in favor of the minutes as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Approved. This meeting was called in response to a request for an opinion. And for those of you who are here at City Hall, there is today's agenda as well as supplementary materials that are available to you. I know that Councilor Stehly is also providing some additional documentation that you can pick up if you wish. The agenda for this meeting was posted online, and also the attachments that are which reflect the research by the City Attorney's Office on relevant opinions, prior opinions, as well as statutes were included in the online posting and are also available at the back of the room. So I would ask the clerk to please read the request for an advisory opinion from Councilor Stehly. Karen?
Hi. Name of individual requesting opinion is Theresa Stehly, City Councilor. I am requesting that the Ethics Board provide guidance to the following questions concerning my right to circulate a petition. Please address, number 1, my right to circulate a Sioux Falls Municipal Citizen petition to amend the charter. Number 2, my right to lead a Sioux Falls Municipal Citizen petition to amend the charter. I am requesting that these inquiries be addressed within 10 days from the date submitted. Thank you. And it's dated and signed August 5th, 2019.
So we as a board are pleased to be able to offer our opinion on those 2 questions, and we were glad to accommodate the request that we deal with it within 10 days of filing.
11.
What's that?
11.
11 days, excuse me. I guess we missed it by 1 day, but we tried to honor that request to be speedy in our deliberation. It is our practice that when we receive a request for an advisory opinion or we receive a complaint, that we have the City Attorney's Office research prior opinions as well as statutes that are relevant to that question. And in today's case, we have 2 questions to deal with. So I would ask the City Attorney, first of all, to establish for us that we have jurisdiction over these 2 questions posed by Councilor Stehly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, jurisdiction, I believe the Board of Ethics has jurisdiction over these questions pursuant to City Ordinances 35.010, 35.052, and 35.057. As far as the relevant law that applies to the questions, there's, under City Charter, Section 8.02 regarding methods for amending the City Charter. The Code of Ethics as codified in Chapter 34 through 001 through 009. That would include the preamble as far as particularly for the questions at hand. The preamble in Canon 1, which is codified in 34.003. Canon 3, which is codified at City Ordinance 34.005, Canon 6 at 34.008, and Canon 7 at 34.009. Additionally, there's standards of conduct for City Council members codified in City Ordinance 35.054.
Is it a correct summary, Mr. City Attorney, that this board has jurisdiction when it regards a request for an opinion from a member of the city council. Is that correct?
Yes, and I would, yes, and of course, that's an advisory opinion, it's a request for an advisory opinion, so the Board of Ethics would be making a decision as to how to advise. I would add to that, there are a couple prior opinions of this board that I believe are on point.
Okay.
Advisory opinion number.
Well, let's, I wonder if, since we have established jurisdiction, I wonder if we then could take each question, please, beginning with the first question. Councilor Stehly's right to circulate Sioux Falls Municipal Citizen Petition to amend the city charter. Could you please take us through what you believe to be the relevant prior opinions of this board to that question, as well as any statutes in place?
Absolutely.
And summarize those, if you would, please.
Sure. Well, I believe the appropriate canons are the one that I mentioned. Some of these, when it comes to ethics, you're talking about context in the law. And so again, I believe that the preamble would apply just in general when it comes to ethical duties. And then again, canons 1, 3, 6, and 7. And then on the specific topic of these questions, in question 1, if we begin with that one, it would be advisory opinion number 07-1. And also advisory opinion 13-2, I believe, merit consideration.
Okay, so would you take us through those two advisory opinions, please? So it's 07-1, and what is the other one?
13-2.
13-2. Copies of both of those are on the back table, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so would you please take us through and summarize those two advisory opinions and why you think they are relevant to this first question? The right of Councilor Stehly to circulate a municipal petition.
Well, advisory opinion number 07-1 dates back to 2007. Factually speaking, that was Mayor Munson who posed a request for an opinion to the board regarding elected official involvement, which applies, of course, to the mayor and the city council. And the question there was about whether elected officials were able to pursue potentially bringing an outdoor swimming pool to a citywide election. At that time, there was a portion of that the board agreed to undertake, and part of it that the board did not. The reason it did not take a portion of that is the board at that time felt it was too speculative as to what those political involvement or political activities meant. Historically, the board is hesitant, if not loath, to not address those types of questions without specific facts, just to avoid conjecture and that sort of thing. The reason that this one appears to be worthy of the board's consideration today is because it did undertake a decision as to, the board did decide that the proposed act of collecting or gathering signatures on a petition would appear to be a violation of canons 3 and 7 of the Code of Ethics of the City Council. It was codified differently back then. It was Canon 3.3 and Canon 7.0, now just labeled as Canons 3 and 7. So that's one of the prior opinions the court or the board should consider. The other.
So let me just. I want to pick up one of those handouts in the back of the room. It is number 07-1. I'll just read the portion. It is the opinion of the board that the proposed act of collecting or gathering signatures on a petition would appear to be a violation of Canons 3.3 and 7.0 of the Code of Ethics of the Sioux Falls City Council as found in Appendix E of the revised ordinances of Sioux Falls. Further, the board today opines that the council's Code of Ethics canons, as considered and adopted by the city in 2000, are adequate guidelines for the council members to follow in considering their potential level of political involvement on ballot issues such as that which is presented here. So I think that is the relevant paragraph, is it not?
Well, I guess what I would say from an advice point of view for me, I think the board, needs to consider whether the level of whether that constitutes precedent for today's decision.
Very good.
And if so, then what you do with it.
Walk through for me and probably the rest of the board the concept of stare decisis and how that could or should impact what we're doing.
Well, this is not a court of law,
Well,
so
I
you're
understand, but
not, so you're not bound by it.
the concept deals with decision-making bodies at whatever level it is, right?
Right, and what I would say is that the law having not changed, which means that the city's standard for this code of ethics remains unchanged, but the art of the law and what courts consider is how to distinguish facts. And so there will be testimony today. It's a meeting and a hearing, and they'll be sworn in, and you decide whether the facts as presented today are similar enough or identical to this, or if there's a distinction. So from an ethical point of view, you do need to rely on prior decisions, in my opinion, but again, you hear different issues, and are they distinguishable?
So the operational word is rely, but we're certainly not bound.
Well, you're not bound to what I would advise is to not presuppose they're the same.
Oh, exactly.
So you hear the facts and the testimony, and you look at the ordinances and the and the canons in this case, and you look at the precedent, and you decide whether it applies in this case. So that's why you can look at Canon 3 and Canon 7. Those are two that were instructive for these facts. Those may be give additional canons, additional authority, just like 13.2. The facts are different. The reason that it appears worthy of the Board of Ethics consideration, in my opinion, is because the question posed in that one was whether a council member could serve as a precinct officer and as an elected church elder. So, Mr. Chair, if I can explain that one.
Well, you also said that 13-2?
That's the one I'm referring to.
Okay, very good.
So look, the reason I think that's on point, or at least worthy of consideration, is because, again, that one related to precinct officer as part of the political process, and then as an elected church elder.
I don't think that is -2. That's the wrong one.
Advisory opinion 13-2.
Yeah, 13-2.
It's 14-2.
Oh, I'm sorry, 14-2.
Right.
Okay.
So the relevant one
It's
is
14-2. I apologize.
Very good. Okay, you want to take us through 14-2, please?
Yeah, the question there was posed as to whether a city council member could participate as a precinct officer or as an elected church elder. And the summary of that is that the Board of Ethics opined that it was not appropriate for a council member to serve as a precinct officer, but that the council member could serve as an elected elder in the church. So as you look at that authority, and it sort of starts to bracket out,
And why do you think that 14-2 is relevant in addressing this question today?
Well, for a couple of reasons. One is because it gives you some of the context as where the boards have been in the past. Again, when you look to precedent, there are often distinguishing characteristics. And also, from the Board of Ethics prior decision, the board wrote that the board is mindful of its role in advising and protecting council members from potential conflicts of interest, even when the law may not prohibit such an activity. And I think that strikes at the heart of the ethical portion of this, is you can't legislate morality, and so that's why we have a body like yours to help determine some of those things when it's not specifically codified or it's incapable of being codified. And so I just think having additional awareness as to what the board has decided in the past about the role of a city council member is instructive and helpful in guiding your decision here today.
34009 has been changed by action of the city council subsequent to this opinion, right?
Let's see, in 2014. Yes, I don't know what the relevant portion was.
Yeah. They simply went in and added, basically, I think, an exclusion for the term precinct.
Oh, okay. Which,
I'm getting a thumbs up from somebody back there that knows. Okay.
Any further questions from the board of our council regarding that first question and relevant prior opinions or statutes? That is addressing the question, Councilor Stehly's right to circulate a Sioux Falls municipal citizen petition to amend the charter. Any further questions of the city attorney? All right, then can we go to question number 2, Councilor Stehly's right to lead a Sioux Falls municipal citizen petition to amend the charter. So would you address that, any relevant prior opinions, please, or statutes?
Yes, I think they're largely, they're very similar requests. The one distinction, in fact, the only word change is from circulate petition to lead a petition. So I don't think, from the canon's point of view, I think it's a very similar analysis, if not the same. The one thing, again, without trying to read too much into it, the question about leading did cause me to think about the leadership component of that and how the council, as a city council, has a supervisory capacity over the city clerk. And we're talking about petitions that would lead to citywide elections. The city clerk is the election official, the official election official for the city of Sioux Falls. And so I just wanted the board to be mindful of the fact that when it comes to, in the realm of ethics, you have, of course, specific prohibitions and things like that. But there's always a concern about the appearance and the propriety, which you've wrestled with on a number of other occasions. And so just taking that, again, distinguishing the two questions, the leading component, I thought the board should be mindful of whether that's an issue where a council member is leading a petition effort to amend the charter, while the election official is supervised by the council as a body, not necessarily individually, but from a perception point of view. It's something that could be an ethical concern.
Very good. Further questions from the board to the city attorney regarding relevant statutes and prior opinions on the second question, that is Councilor Stehly's right to lead a Sioux Falls municipal citizen petition to amend the charter. Any further questions from the board? All right, we would call on Councilor Stehly then to give a statement, and we would like to swear you in. So, Gary, if you would administer the oath, please.
Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you shall give relative to this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the penalties of perjury?
I do.
Officer Stehly, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for convening this so quickly. I really, really appreciate it. And I was gathering documents and kind of found out at the last minute that there were perhaps going to be some discussions about past procedures. Let me remind us all that I was here a year ago asking for the same question, not specifically related to a charter issue, but just my ability to lead a petition drive, my ability to participate in a petition drive. And at that time, I didn't hear any mention of this 07.1 that they had ruled you couldn't do that in the past. Last year, you told me as a body that you didn't have anything substantial to make a decision about. So I kind of felt like the door was open, that when something would materialize, that you would, I should come back again.
My recollection is that we said it was too hypothetical.
Yes.
And we invited you to come back with
Yes.
a specific
Exactly.
example.
But if I'm kind of hearing from our wonderful city attorney that perhaps the door has been closed because of what was decided in the past. And no one said that to me last year, even speculatively, that don't come back because we've already decided in the past you can't do it. So again, my hope was that I could participate. This charter issue, there's three pieces to it. And my understanding, as I've talked with our city clerk, is that there's different venues to get something on the ballot for the people. And this is really all about helping the citizens. I'm a citizen. I'm elected, but I'm also a citizen. But the first venue, which we're experiencing in our city right now, is the Charter Revision Commission. And you can go in front of them and beseech them to put something on the ballot. All three of the issues being addressed in this petition have been presented by council members in the past. All three of them have been asked to be put on the ballot to the Charter Revision Commission by different council members. And all three were rejected. So the next venue we have to help the citizens vote on this is, of course, a petition drive, which has happened. And so as a citizen, I'm also elected, but I'm asking to be a part of that. I did include leadership in that just because it's kind of like when you're suing an entity, you want to include anybody who could be vaguely touched by the issue. So I'm just trying to cast the net out as widely as I can. And you're referencing the opinion and the request back in 2007, of which, of course, I was a leader in that one for the Drake Springs pool. But I did want to ask you to pay attention.
Prior to being elected to the city council.
Yes, yes. At that time, I was elected to citizen advocacy, as I still am. But back then, and I have documents on that, that the city council and our mayor, and I was aware of this as a citizen, because here we are, we did a petition drive, got 5,500 signatures, and then the city forms a group called a Pool for All Seasons. They hire a consultant, and they pitch in anywhere from $100 to $300. And these are counselors: Vernon Brown, Pat Costello, Bob Jamieson, Dee Knudsen, and our mayor at the time, Dave Munson. So they were allowed to have this group that was working against what we were doing as a citizen group, initiative group. So apparently, you know, that was an acceptable action for them to take. And they were doing mailings and speaking publicly. So there's another element to this, which I didn't include in my request, but that third thing, which I should have, but maybe you won't even talk about it, but I will, is that what is also our ability to discuss this publicly? What is our ability to advocate for or against this? And our mayor has already set a precedence by telling the Argus Leader last week that he doesn't support it. So we've allowed him to speak, you know, publicly about his feelings. So that if you would rule that I can't help to collect signatures, then I personally would like to be able to have my freedom of speech to say, you know, tell people why I think this is a good thing. I also want to come back, and Councilor Erickson is here, and that's wonderful. I wanted to talk about the 3 instances I referenced when I was here last summer, and you have those in front of you. And as a citizen, you know, I watched these things happen. I wasn't elected at the time that the county commission was circulating a petition drive to raise the alcohol tax. So elected officials doing this within our community, petition drive. We also, I wasn't elected.
With all due respect, our jurisdiction is over
No, I understand, but I'm just.
Over city employees and city officials.
I get it, but I'm just saying, as far as the precedent in our community of people elected being able to have that freedom to do that. We also had the school board election, or excuse me, save the school date. They wanted to have school start later. Christine Erickson was involved with that. I helped them as well, but she collected signatures that went to a vote through the school district.
Again, Ms. Stehly, that's school board
I
as
understand.
opposed to city. So-
And I was able to say this last summer, so I'm going to say it again. You didn't stop me last summer. The last one I have in front of you has to deal with Mark Mickelson's petitioning to get an initiative on the ballot statewide. He was a legislator. He was circulating petitions. He lives in Sioux Falls. So I really think, I'm so glad we're here. I'm so glad now we're finally having this discussion to say, can we participate? Can I gather some signatures? Or will an ethics violation be filed against me? And people have said to me, Theresa, why don't you just go out and start collecting signatures? It's your right. And I've said, well, wait a minute. The minute I do that and someone files an ethics violation against me, it taints the whole process. And I don't want to do that to the citizens who are going to be working hard on this. So I think this is an important decision. I think what you decide here now about this is going to, the state will be watching. It's going to say in Sioux Falls, our citizens are able, our elected officials are able to participate. Or maybe we'll say this municipal election, elected officials are not, but if you're state representative, working for the school board or the county, you can. So I think that's important. And the other thing that is very unique about this, and I've done several petition drives, successful, is that this is a charter amendment petition drive. We've never done this before. So we've done initiatives, we've done referendums, never addressed this particular part of our government. So as a citizen, I think it's important. I want to participate. And again, I really appreciate you coming together. I appreciate an open mind, a fairness, as I know you do. And that's all I have to say for now.
Mr. Stehly, advisory opinion 07-1, where do you think the facts differ today from the facts in that particular case that we could accept as a precedent today?
This is a charter revision commission, a charter revision issue versus a referendum and initiative. So if that's for you to make the differentiation. But again, when I was here last year, nobody said to me that we've got this previous decision and don't ever come back again. So that's why I'm here.
However, if we look at last year's advisory opinion in the situation you brought, there's a statement in there, the board refers Councilor Stehly to the advisory opinion 0701 for guidance. So the 701 was referred to in the written opinion.
Right, but you didn't say it to me.
Yeah, I beg your pardon.
Well, I mean, you didn't say it.
We issued an advisory opinion and we cited
Right, but
07-1.
But the opinion was you couldn't make an opinion. Because you said you don't have anything, there's nothing tangible to be addressing.
We did that with additional guidance, additional suggested guidance. You asked for guidance. We said, we're not going to give you a specific answer to a hypothetical question. We suggest that you look at that prior ruling and make a decision. And then if you have a specific question, come back with that specific question, which is what you've done. I think that's wonderful. So,
Yes, that's why I'm here, yes. So, I mean, once again, we had the same issue at the city council meeting the other night. I said, hey, if you don't like the resolution I'm bringing forward, vote no. So we're bringing it here. You have an opportunity. I'm asking you to make a decision on this particular thing that you can say yes or no, okay?
I have a follow-up question for you, Ms. Stehly. Some of the facts and circumstances that you described in a county, a state, in a school board, and a referendum and an initiative, all things that are very close but not the same. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and I appreciate and agree with your comparison. In doing those, I heard that in some cases there was a signature. Some elected official had signed a petition. In some cases, they had donated to cover the costs of a petition or a campaign. In some cases, they had circulated, and in some cases, they had actually led. In all those different cases, the situations that you described, it seems to me this is very much like when I'm out on the interstate and I'm driving and the speed limit is 80, and if I can drive 79, I can drive 80, I can drive 81, maybe 79 is signing, or 75 is signing, and 80 is donating. At some point, each of those things are a graduation of the one before, and that's how I'm thinking about it. I'd like you to tell me whether or not you would concur that that is a metaphor that makes any sense.
Well, first of all, we're not talking about someone driving 85. I'm not advocating for an 85 mile per hour proposal that would be illegal.
The example,
okay?
The example I gave you was simply to illustrate whether or not those four items, sign, donate, circulate, and lead, are related and simply and graduations of a level of involvement. You see it? That's how I see it.
Well, I think they're all tied back to an elected official's ability to participate in the process.
So you see no difference between leading and signing a petition? They're the same.
And I didn't say signing a petition.
Circulating.
That was
I'm
one-
talking about no, I said that, no, I didn't say signing a petition. That's not one of the things I mentioned. We can play the tape back. I talked about a pool for all seasons where they formed a campaign against, but it was donating into a campaign they formed as elected officials to go against an initiative that was going to be voted on, to promote their opinion about why this was not the right thing, to help influence the public's opinion. So I'm throwing that in because apparently there was a ruling that said they weren't supposed to be doing that. The one that you're referencing should have been, maybe somebody should have caught that at the time and said ethics violation. But they did do what this 1-07 said not to do. So that I'm just referencing that separately, and then I'm just throwing these other things out as examples where it's not like unheard of to have an elected official participate in a petition drive, gathering signatures.
Further questions from the board for Councilor Stehly?
I'm curious about something, and I always preface my questions with, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm probably not as intimately familiar with the laws as our attorney is, but I'm assuming that you want to amend the charter.
I do.
And is it possible to do that, though, in your current role on the city council? So I'm confused as to why you're not going that route.
And as I stated before,
Okay.
all three of these issues have been brought by council members to the Charter Revision Commission to ask for consideration for them to put on the ballot. Issue number one, since you opened the door. I'm not an attorney either, but I know about the doors being open. Number one, Christine Erickson asked the Charter Revision Commission to consider requiring a supermajority for bonding. The Charter Revision Commission decided not to put that on the ballot. Councilor Greg Neitzer appeared before the Charter Revision Commission, asked them to consider taking the majority plus one threshold for being elected and changing it back to a plurality. Charter Revision Commission said no, they didn't do it. Thirdly, Councilor Pat Starr, thankfully they're all sitting here. Pat Starr went before them and said, I'd like to propose that you allow the citizens, and this is all about letting the citizens vote on it, that you allow the citizens to vote on removing the mayor from being an active council presence during our meetings, which is, these all three are on the triple check. And they said, Charter Revision Commission said no. So in answer to your question, that door is closed.
So you don't feel that that would be a successful route for you to take?
We've already tried. It was not a successful route.
Further questions? Sue?
No, thanks.
Greg?
I have no more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you stand by, please. We will now open the floor to anybody in the audience who wishes to address us relevant to the two questions at hand. That is Councilor Stehly's right to circulate a Sioux Falls municipal citizen petition to amend the charter, and number two, her right to lead a Sioux Falls municipal citizen petition to amend the charter. Is there anyone in attendance here today who wishes to address us? So come forward, identify yourself, and we will swear you in.
Christine Erickson, City Council.
Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you shall give relative to this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, under the penalties of perjury?
Councilor Erickson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commission. As stated, my name is Christine Erickson. I do want to just make a couple clarifying statements through this, since I was referenced throughout much of the testimony earlier. The supermajority, I did in fact bring that to the Charter Revision Commission last year. However, that can be brought forth by the City Council as well. I chose not to do that because I did not have the support or the votes, and so then I went to the Charter Revision, who said we're not comfortable at acting on this at that time. I would say they said no to me that year. That doesn't mean that someone can't bring it back year after year or bring it back to the City Council again. So I want to make sure I clarify that as well. Since I was referenced, I did carry petitions for the school start date several years ago. Commissioner Ann Hayek was referenced and former Representative Mark Mickelson was represented. The differences with these 3 items that were referenced, I think is very important to note, is that each one is ruled under a different jurisdiction of law, as well as Representative Mickelson does not oversee the Secretary of State. Commissioner Ann Hayek does not oversee the county auditor, and those 2 positions are in fact elected officials that are separate from those that carry the petition. When I carried the petition, it was under a school start, a different entity, a different body at that time, in which I did get legal advice from David Feifley at the time to ensure that I was able to do that. So those situations are currently...
You were on the council at that time?
I was on the council. I was a city council early in my first term. Under the current situation, there are 8 city councilors that do oversee, hire, and or fire the city clerk that would run this election. And I think that is the vast difference with this. And those are the points that I would like to make. Thank you for your time.
Can you stand by for one moment, please? Any questions from the board? Councilor Erickson? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to address us? Please come forward, identify yourself, we'll swear you in.
Greg Mainstream, Sioux Falls City Council.
Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you shall give relative to this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the penalties of perjury?
I do.
Motion answered, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, first of all, I want to say I'm not here to advocate either way in your decision. I will be honest, I have not studied the canons and all of the relevant decisions, so I'm going to leave it in your wise hands. I just want to give you a little bit of a couple things to think about from, I think, my unique perspective. First of all, regarding the Charter Revision Commission, all of the items that are on, in fact, on this particular proposal to go forward for a vote are pending this year, right now. They have been proposed to the Charter Revision Commission, and they are currently working through their process. They have a few more months left, and they may or may not act and put it on a public ballot, which they certainly could do. And as was stated by Councilor Erickson, if they decided not to, you can bring it back year after year after year, if you so choose. So I just did want to point that out. And some items, the city council, and as was stated, there's multiple ways that you get things on the ballot. The city council could bring some of those items forward. The one item that we probably can't do has to do with the plurality versus a 50%, because that would go into a section of the charter that we are prohibited from amending. There's certain sections that we cannot amend because I would think that the founders thought that it was self-serving to make edits to certain things that have to do with our composition and some of those things. So that is essentially kept to the Charter Revision Commission or the people through the petition process. So to my real reason for being here, I just want to point out, and I just want you to consider this, and I'm not sure how it's going to affect your decision making, but I think it is important. As the vice chair of the city council, I also act as the operations manager. I'm doing that this year. We elect one every year. The operations manager is also the personnel manager for the city council. So I directly, quote unquote, supervise, although I will say the body hires and fires our city staff, our city council staff, and they all report, our city staff, city council staff report to each of us individually. We're all their bosses, individually and collectively.
And how do you see that relevant to the questions at hand?
So, and here's where it gets to. We have primarily the important ones that are important for this discussion. The city clerk, which is most important, because that person has a statutory duty to do all of the things involved with if somebody's bringing a petition forward. They have to do all of the filing, they have to judge the petitions, they have to determine whether they're valid, they have to do all of that work. That city clerk runs the election if it's going to happen. So that is all under the city clerk. In addition, the budget analyst and our operations manager do a lot of work on our behalf. Clerical work, research, things like that. Anything that council may direct them to do individually or collectively. So this is where I'm going with this. I have a concern that if a city councilor is involved either as part of a group or they circulate a petition, you will have the city clerk primarily, who will literally have to make decisions, make judgments, make statutory decisions as far as invalidating petitions or looking at it, when the entity that is bringing it forward includes one of their bosses. And I think that presents a major problem as far as there could be concerns about real or perceived coercion, intimidation, feeling like they might have to violate their ethical duty. I think there's a big risk. And then in terms of circulating, if I circulate a petition as a city councilor, I would then be signing that affidavit saying that these signatures are true and correct. If the city clerk invalidates that, that puts them in the position where, again, they are directly making a decision that, their boss handed in and they circulated that petition. So I guess that's my big thing, that as you look at the code of ethics and you're thinking about how this works, I just want you to think about that. I guess that's the concern that I have, is that I think staff could be in a very precarious position, and it may pose, and in that, it may put them in the position of doing something unethical, and maybe, now, and I haven't reviewed the canons, you will know better, that might put a counselor in the position of doing something that then is something that might be unethical for them. I'm not judging, I want to throw it out there.
You stand by, please. Questions from the board, or Council Knight? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address this board relevant to these two questions? Councilor Brecky, do you identify yourself, please? You want to be sworn in?
Councilmember Janet Brecky.
Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you shall give relative to this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the penalties of perjury? Yes, I do.
Councilor Brecky, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate being able to come before you and discuss this issue with you. I think I view things perhaps a little differently than others because of my background. I was the city attorney, who actually, implemented the charter form of government and set up this committee, gave it its duties and powers, and shepherded this ethics ordinance, through the city council. So I do have an intimate relationship with this document and, what it was designed to do. There's several things I want you to focus on as you do this, and one of the things that I want you to think very carefully about, and one of the things when we discuss ethics, in the realm of ethics in government, you have to be very careful about when you're dealing with elected officials. And I do believe this is a First Amendment issue, and you need to be tuned into that. Not only was I the city attorney who implemented this, but I served on the International Municipal Lawyers Ethics section, and I chaired this section, and I worked for years on establishing a model code of ethics for local government. It was this document. And the year that I chaired that commission was the year that we finally passed it. And it was at a time when Sioux Falls needed one. And we were the first city in the country to adopt the model code of ordinances, that was created by the IMLA.
Can I just quick ask, when you refer to this document, can you specify what you're...
These chapters, our canons of ethics.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was a model. It was a model that the ethics committee that I sectioned, and it was about 300 members of municipal and county attorneys throughout the country. IMLA consists of it stands for International Municipal Lawyers Association. It has about 5,000 members in the United States, Canada, and Germany, of city attorneys. And so years and years of being actively involved in ethics. And I will tell you, when we were discussing this, this model code, that frequently came up about, and you'll see it when you look at the ethics, the conflict of interest chapter. There's two sections. One governs officials and employees, and one governs elected officials, and it's different. And the focus on the conflict of interest section is more about financial interest and undue influence. Now, the ability of an elected official to participate in good government is also addressed in there. And I would direct you to canon it was actually canon 7. Well, first the preamble. Let's go to the preamble. The preamble
Why don't you read the preamble?
I'll read the
as well?
preamble. The preamble talks, I'm going to take an excerpt from it, but the preamble says, the stability and proper operation of democratic representative government depends upon the continuing consent of the governed, upon the public confidence in the integrity of the government, and upon the responsible exercise of the trust conferred upon the people. Now here's the part I want to emphasize. Government decisions and policy must be made and implemented through proper channels and processes of government structure. The purpose of this code is to establish guidelines for ethical standards of conduct for city council members. If you go to Canon 7, which is one of the canons that you addressed when you were confronted with the petition issue, it's completely different. I think it's two completely different issues, because you're talking now, you're not talking about amending an ordinance, through the initiative or referendum process, or, referring an ordinance or initiating a new ordinance. That's an ordinance. We're talking about amending the charter, the very written document that creates the powers, of government itself. And I think that's a huge distinction.
And this is canon 7 you're referring to?
Canon 7B is the canon that I think
If you think it's relevant, why don't you read it to us?
city council members not only gives us a right, but a duty to participate in good government. City council members have a civic responsibility to support good government by every available legal and ethical means, to continue to inform and educate the citizenry about the affairs and processes of city government, and to make themselves available to citizens of the city so that they may ascertain and respond to the needs of the community. In doing so, the city council members may join or affiliate with civic organizations that advocate and support the principles consistent with the Constitution and the laws of the United States and South Dakota. Our charter has 3 ways, 3 perfectly legal and appropriate ways that we can amend our form of government. And who should better be involved in any or all 3 of those processes than the people who are living it day to day and have a good insight as to what might be good or bad government. The 3 processes have been talked about. The most traditional one is the charter revision process. And, again, there's actually 4 proposed amendments, but 3 of them have been before that process. And that group has elected not to move those issues forward. The second one is the city council members themselves can actually amend it by ordinance. And again, it always ends up going to the public for a vote. None of these entities can do it by themselves. The powers section was removed intentionally from the city council's ability to make amendments, and that makes sense. You don't want the council members themselves messing or tinkering with their own powers section. Okay, all of the proposals that are being brought forth, or the amendment that's being brought forth by this grassroots effort is to the powers section. So the city council cannot make changes to that.
So those 3 avenues are by ordinance of the city council, which then are referred to the voters. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's one. Which, City Charter Commission can obviously propose changes. Is
And
that
again,
subject?
referred to the people for
That is
vote.
also referred to the people, or the people of Sioux Falls can initiate. Is that correct?
They could
So
form
those 3 avenues.
a committee of 15 members, of 15 registered voters, can form and then be responsible for circulating, for supervising the circulation of the petitions. And then they have to, I think, get 5% of the registered voters in the last election. And when they then, return those petitions to the city clerk, then it's all administrative at that point. And that's another issue that is being raised here. As a city council member, as an individual, I do not supervise. He's an employee I work with, but I do not supervise him as an individual. I cannot direct him or tell him how to do his job.
I mean, and in this particular situation, everything is administrative. If you read that section of the charter, what happens after those are turned in, there's no decisions that are being made. He's just simply directed to do this, and then an election date must be set. Yes.
So would you then specifically address each of those questions and what your interpretation is of the statute and also precedent by this board? So first, the right of Councilor Stehly to circulate a petition, and then separately, perhaps because of the relationship between the City Council and the City Clerk, her right to lead Sioux Falls Municipal Citizen Petition to amend the charter. Would you address both of those and the position you would take on each of those?
Well, again, just, full disclosure, I have also put a petition before you, so you're going to be ruling on me in a week or so, and I put a much broader one in place. I simply said, I want, you to tell me, is there anything I can't do? Because, quite frankly, I don't think there's very much you can prevent a public official from doing because they're elected official. We answer solely to the, we have one single qualification, for being in this position, and that's a valid election certificate. Our bosses are the public. Our job and our duty particularly as at-large city council members and all city council members is to the public. And when I was campaigning, one of the issues that I stumbled into in my very deep grassroots campaign was a very strong feel out there that there needed to be some changes to this form of government. The revisions that have been brought before the Charter Revision Commission right now were brought by the original drafters, Dale Froelich and Joe Kirby.
So relative to question number one, you believe it is the right of any member of the City Council to circulate a petition?
Yes, because I think the process that is being followed is completely legal. It's authorized by the Charter. Our helping citizens navigate a process, this is no different than us, I'm helping, someone get a screen put up at the baseball park by navigating with him over to the Parks Department and working through the park board with them. I have sat down with this group, and I have actually sat down with them and the city clerk and said, is there anything that they need to do, to make sure that their petitions are in proper form? And I think that's my job. They have every right to form this group and do this. The people, and it would be helpful, I think, ultimately in the end to the Charter Revision Commission to see if I'm correct, that there's a groundswell out there that would really like to see, some minor changes to the charter. And have latched on to these ones because it's virtually the same amendments.
And relative to question number two, is there any difference if Councilor Stehly or any other member of the council can lead a petition direct?
Again, I don't see any difference. I don't see how you can stop someone from an avenue that's recognized in the charter. This is everything they've done thus far is completely legal, above board, open, and according to the parameters set out by the charter.
And you would not see a conflict or even a perception of a conflict, considering that the city clerk is also certifying the election, essentially.
If he had any discretion, maybe, but he doesn't have any discretion. In this process, his job will simply be to follow the charter and state election law, and it's very clear what his obligations are.
Ms. Becky, that city clerk does have responsibility to validate signatures.
And
that is a decision,
right?
Not a black and white. I have to check this.
He has to follow state law though, and how he validates those petitions. So he has to, it is pretty black and white. They either, they either are a resident or not a resident. They're either, he goes through and checks those signatures. But that's pretty administrative.
So, I chaired the ethics committee for the South Dakota Board of Accountancy for 17 years, and so
I've reviewed a couple of your tapes, and I appreciate I'd like to talk ethics with you someday because I appreciate the depth of your understanding.
You going through the Canon 7, and I had also highlighted exactly what you said right here. But I also had several other things in between Canon 1, 3, and 6, and I'm going to list all of them and then ask you to opine, because as an ethics person, I'm sure you've had to tell people a lot that ethics are about principles and laws are about rules. You know, it's not, you know, to use an example that didn't work very well with Ms. Stehly, it's not 79, 80, or 81. It's too slow or too fast. And so there's degrees. The things that I highlighted, I'd like you to think about is, council members shall honor the letter and spirit of the law, that's one. Should avoid the appearance of impropriety, number 2. City council members should limit extra governmental activities to minimize the risk of conflict with official duties. And then number 4, city council members should refrain from political activity inappropriate to his or her office. So we've got these words, these inappropriate and minimize, attempt, appearance, all of those ethics words that you won't find in law anywhere. Tell me why I should adopt your feeling if this is absolute law as opposed to the degrees of involvement thing on the, what I'm going to call the ethics side.
How I view that is, again, you know, I see it's completely different when you're talking about initiative and referendum, because that has to do with the legislative, you know, the legislative powers that the council has. There's a section in the charter that lays out the three ways the charter can be changed.
I understand those.
And there's no problem whatsoever, I would believe, that I could appear, as everybody said, I could appear for years in front of the Charter Revision Commission and get no results. And no one would say, you have to get an ethics opinion before you go to the Charter Revision Commission, because all those words, you could say apply to that. Well, nobody even thought twice that I can appear before the Ethics Commission. So why can I not communicate with, support, help my constituents in this city who have joined together and are by all means legal, following the charter in order to bring an issue before the people? I could also bring an issue through the council sections, but again, we're not allowed to do the powers. You know, but if we were, you know, I think you would have a legitimate question to say, how come you're not doing it, you know, through the council section? But I think I can do it any of those 3 ways.
Can you go into that again for me? That was my question. So as city council, you said you can amend by ordinance, then it goes to the public for vote. And why is that not an avenue?
Because they have 3 different exceptions, and it's the powers sections. In other words, the city council cannot amend their own powers. It makes sense. I mean, we shouldn't be in there tinkering with our powers while we're in office.
So that would be a clear conflict of interest is what
it is prohibited. The charter prohibits us from doing that way. The only 2 ways, the power sections of the council, I think in the mayor can be changed, is through charter revision and the petition drive.
Juan Harris, any further questions?
Yes.
Sue Ross, any questions?
I would just comment that having been involved in reviewing petitions for their sufficiency, not just the laws, but the administrative rules of South Dakota, which have the force of law, I believe, have over the years gotten more and more and more detailed as to specifically what a petition may include and how, you know, there's even sections on methodology for conducting the random sample, requirements for counting signatures, guidelines for acceptance of petitions. And so, as Councilor Brecky says, a lot of this is administrative. It's all laid out in the administrative rules. Having said that, I still am concerned although as you said, you don't oversee the city clerk. But I can see that person in that position being put in an uncomfortable position. If he or she has to tell a city councilor that, no, you didn't do this petition right, I'm throwing it out. That's one where I'm kind of troubled. And I hadn't thought about the fact that even circulating a petition, you are signing under oath that you have witnessed all the signatures. So what if somebody challenges and says, I don't believe you witnessed all those signatures? That's a situation I've had to deal with in the past. That's where you get into the judgment calls. And so,
You know,
Councilor Brecky, you want to address that, please?
I would address that. Our staff deal with that every day because they are employed by a group, a political body, and there are political shenanigans that they have to deal with every day as they try to navigate the 8 people that are all their bosses. But they do know that collectively, as a body, that's who actually hires and fires them. And so, yes, they're trying to please us all every day. And sometimes, it's difficult. They have extremely difficult jobs. But they navigate them very well. I mean, they know that we cannot, hire and fire them by ourselves. They have to, and they have to navigate the politics. And I would say that about this. It's, any council member who wants to do this certainly does it at their own risk. I mean, it could be political failure. It could be, the stupidest political decision you ever made. But I do think it's a political decision that a city council member has a right to make if they want to engage or not engage, be involved or not be involved. But it is, and because, it is, we are political creatures, and because of our line of authority being directed to the public.
Mr. Rust, any further questions?
no, thank you.
Mr. Harrison? Rick LaFawn? Thank you, Councilor Brickey. Anyone else wish to offer testimony today? Councilor, you can come forward. Introduce yourself, please, and the clerk will swear you in.
Pat Starr, Sioux City Council.
Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you shall give relative to this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the penalties of perjury?
I do.
Councilor Starr, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. I've probably had a few more minutes to think about Mr. LaFollette's example, and if you don't mind, I'd like to use it as part of my with you today.
I hope you have better luck with it than
I thought for the last few minutes, so hopefully I'll get a chance to get it in the right direction. I look at it in your example of driving that 79 miles an hour on the interstate is really that, hey, I'm totally hands off. I shouldn't be involved in anything controversial. I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be at 79 miles an hour. There's no way I'm going to be mistaken for going faster than that or even driving the speed limit. In this circumstance, I look at 80 as being the way as a counselor or an elected official is going to the Charter Revision Commission and making recommendations and things that I've heard from citizens to bring forward to that group. I think that's well within that. I also believe that being part of the petition drive would also be at that 80 miles an hour. That is the legal limit of what the job allows us to do. Where I think it gets interesting is when we get to 81 miles an hour. I believe, and you're not being asked this today, but I think that the next logical step is, can I be involved? Where can I be involved in a campaign once the signatures are certified and this issue or other issues would be put on the ballot? Where would your role as a counselor be? The difference between the education process and actually campaigning for one side or the other. I think that would be at 81 miles an hour. I think the public would judge that. I think a lot of people who drive on our interstates don't consider 81 miles an hour speeding, and I think it would be even higher than that. But like I said, I think that education process or cross where that line is, where education stops in a ballot initiative like this, and where actually advocating for one side or the other is. I also think that maybe 85 miles an hour would be, in this situation, being part of that group of 15 citizens. Again, you're not being asked that today, whether that would be ethical or not. I think that may or may not be part of Councilor Stehly's question of the leadership of an initiated process like this. Again, I don't believe that's what she's asking you today. She may be able to clarify that, but I think that may be closer to 85 miles an hour, where most of us would agree that you would be speeding at 85 or 86. So separating those things, I think, are the difference. I think we, as elected officials, do have a role of educating and being involved in the process. I think those that have served in an elected office, I think there's many times where someone says, hey, I'm not following this race. How do you feel about the candidates? You've had probably a chance to meet them, or you've been part of this issue, and being able to tell our constituents how we feel one way. I've never told anyone how to vote, but I have suggested that I'm supporting someone or one candidate or the other. One of the canons, again, Mr. LaFollette, you brought up was inappropriate political activity. I think that in that canon, what that means to me is the party politics, the real political side of things, not necessarily political activity. If I'm being clear about the difference between the two things. I think holding office for a political party, or whether it's on a local, county, or statewide race, I think that to me is inappropriate political activity with the way we operate as a city in a nonpartisan fashion, and I think that does that. The other that I want to quickly cover is this putting the city clerk in a difficult position. One of the great things that I've only had the privilege of serving with one clerk, and the clerk that we have in place now is probably one of the most highly ethical people I've ever gotten to know. We've been through a number of petition drives and things. If I have the privilege of running for re-election, which my wife is choosing that I don't, but if I do choose next spring, whether I choose to run or not, I have to circulate petitions. I have to do the exact same things that I would be doing by circulating this petition. And it may be one thing if it's a petition that I'm circulating for an issue, but I'll tell you what, I'll take it a lot more personal if there's some way where he needs to point out, the current city clerk has to point out that I didn't circulate my petitions for re-election in a way. We can't ever eliminate some of those uncomfortable positions. We've all had jobs and roles where it is uncomfortable, but we do the right thing. I think a majority of people do the right thing when they're put in that position and in that role of doing their job. I do not believe that Mr. Greco or anyone who would come after him in the city clerk's role would consider that the 8 counselors would affect how he does his job. I think that, yes, it would be uncomfortable, it would be unfortunate, but he is a dedicated individual, as well as anybody I believe that would come after him, that they would do the right thing first rather than worrying about the pressure of what their boss does. We've all faced those kind of situations where we've had to go to our boss with something that may be their pet project or their thing, and actually have to point out what is right rather than what is expedient.
So, Councilor Starr, and relative to questions 1 and 2, you believe that, do you believe that Councilor Stehly has an absolute right to circulate petitions for amending the city charter, and does she also have that same right to lead and get deeply involved in that petition drive?
I do, Boo. As using the earlier example or analogy, I believe that is 80 miles an hour on the interstate.
Okay. Any concerns about the appearance of a conflict of interest or of impropriety?
I do not believe that there is an appearance of impropriety or conflict. I believe that is being involved in the political process, and I think that comes with the election certificate that we earned from the citizens of Sioux Falls when we were elected to this position.
Questions from the board?
I hope I did okay with your analogy.
You did far better than my colleague.
Thank you.
Any further testimony? Come forward. forward, identify yourself, please, and the clerk will swear you in.
Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you shall give relative to this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and may no case of perjury?
Yes. Mr. Danielson, we welcome your testimony relative to the two questions at hand.
Yes, I will. Bruce Danielson in Sioux Falls. For several years, I've been working on this idea of making some changes to the operation of the city council. And this would seem to be the time to do it because a group of people decided to band together and create an organization called Triple Check the Charter. Triple Check the Charter is a total organization excluded. We've stayed away from actually being involved, bringing city council members in, city government people in. These are people who have a deep interest in how the government runs. And we have been working through different petition drives. I'm not even sure how many petition drives I've been involved in since 1972 when I did my first one. So I understand the things that an auditor like Sue Rouse had to do in Minnehaha County to go through the petitions and verify signatures and all the new administrative rules and all the complications. And I even spoke to the Board of Elections the other day on an issue that is near and dear to my heart in all of this. The two questions before the body today, I kind of look at splitting hairs to find a distinction. We are a grassroots effort. We have been working hard to come up with a way that makes people's ability when they fill out one of these voter registration forms count for the rest of their lives. That's what this is really coming down to. You're essentially saying to these 15 voters that put this packet together and these voters out here who ran for an office that this piece of paper and the First Amendment are in conflict. And I have a real issue with trying to stop people from being able to be part of the process. The Code of Ordinances we've been talking about in section 8001 proposal of amendment, it's very clear in here that amendments to this charter may be framed and proposed, A, in the manner provided by law, or B, by ordinance of the City Council containing the full text of the proposed amendment, except that sections 1.04, 1.05, 2.01, 2.02, 2.03, and 2.04, and Article 3, which is the mayor, cannot be so amended, effective upon adoption, or by report of the Charter Commission. In other words, what they're saying is, it's very clear in here that these people out here who are members, they're citizens, they have one of these on file.
You're referring to members of the City Council? The
members of the City Council, and there's 8 of them, that they can't be involved and express their opinion. That becomes a real problem in our government and in our society. They are elected officials. They did not give up this, or they did not give up their First Amendment rights.
So you believe that Councilor Stehly has an absolute right to both circulate a petition as well as lead a petition drive?
Yes.
And do you have any concerns about the optics of that?
No, I do not. And the reason I don't, especially in our situation, and I'll go through a little bit more of this in a moment, but in our situation, as I just handed a paper to the clerk, it shows 15 members of the community who have signed on to this. No one in this room is a member of that group except me. There's a whole series of other citizens of Sioux Falls who are part of that group. We're not asking the City Council to take over control of this process. We're not asking the Charter Revision Commission to take control of our process. There is no government official on that list. Sure, there's one retired one in here, but that's, yeah. he's out on a sailboat right now, or heading there. So we're very comfortable that we have a true citizen-led effort. We have we've put before the council, or before the council clerk, the ability to stamp, which they did, our affidavit to say who is on the committee. We have presented, and we are presenting around town, the actual language of the petition. And I won't get into what that covers, except to just say we have been through all the legal steps to make sure that we're doing it right, so nobody can come back and say that they're, like in 2016, there's an oath problem, or that we're expending city resources on it, like the issue that was brought up in 2014, or what got brought up in some of these other issues that have been.
With all due respect, Mr. Danielson, if you would
I'm coming to that.
Find your remarks to the two questions.
Well, we are, because there have been these issues in the past where some of the people in this room, I have helped them with their petition drives. The petition drives they were deeply involved in. And these are council members, and they're different ones. And that was always the question, is it legal, is it proper for them to be in it? So I looked at what was presented here today, and I appreciate finally getting a hold of it. I was looking for these rulings on the city's webpage, and they weren't there, so I'm glad they were here. But advisory opinion...
They are now posted on the city website.
Well, they weren't this morning even, so...
They were this morning.
No, okay, I couldn't find them once again.
They were attached to the agenda.
Well, I tried finding them, but I didn't. Okay, so 0601. It states it's not a conflict of voice or wear your support in a pin. 071, we're not talking about an issue where city employees were doing avocational education. They were advocating for a position. And it was decided that that's not ethical. We're not talking about using city resources as was being proposed in this, even though they said they were donating money and doing other things. These people were doing things while they were on the clock. And that's where the problem got to be. And later, Mayor Munson put in an executive order that was to be explicitly forbidding that type of activity.
That's the pool proposal.
That was the, yes. In 13.2 doesn't apply because it's financial interest of an elected official or an employee of the city. So Mayor Huther came and asked to see if he could be in the room or be part of the voting for trying to get some money for his tennis center. And 14.2 is there's no sovereign power issue here. They don't have the ability in this situation to actually individually make a law. They have to act as the body, as the city council. Outside of the city council voting as a group of the 8 and making the decision to move it to the ballot, that's the only thing that they would possibly have anything to do in here. And the charter already says they can't even touch these things except one area that we're dealing with in here. The charter specifically says they can't touch these areas. So the only thing that they can do...
Those regarding the city council's powers.
Yes. The city council's powers are very limited in this area. So they're out of it. So because they have this document and they have an election certificate, they no longer...
What document are you referring to?
I'm sorry, the document I'm referring to is the voter registration form, and they have the power to vote. They ran for an office, and now we're telling them that they can't have a voice in the rest of the government. That's just not even remotely feasible. The Congress, the Senate, the peer, everywhere else in government, people who run for office are allowed to be part of the process. What I am concerned about in rejecting what Councilor Stehly wants to do is saying that because she ran for office, she's lost a chunk of her citizenship. And that's a problem. And if that becomes a problem, we may have to deal with that in another way. This was brought up, but Mayor Ken Hankin last week on August 8th made a statement in the Argus Leader saying what his pros and cons were on the situation. I won't go into that in detail, but he's already made his statement. Are we going to have to file an ethics complaint on him for speaking his mind on an issue? Whether he signs the petition or not, whether he votes in this election or not? Are we saying...
The matter before us is not whether or not...
But you're saying that these people can't make a decision.
Mr. Daniels, excuse me. The matter before us is not whether we're going to restrict elected officials from stating their opinions. The questions are whether or not we're going to allow or recommend that in an advisory opinion that a member of City Council can circulate a petition or leave a petition drive. This is not a case where we're going to silence an elected official
but
in
you
their
are.
opinion.
But you actually are. By saying they can't be involved in this, they can't pass a petition. We never asked any one of these individuals to be part of our leadership. So they're not going to be part of this leadership. Who knows in the future? We don't know. You said you aren't going to deal in hypotheticals. They weren't asked to be part of the leadership in this. But they've come before you asking if they can pass around a petition and do the public speaking and whatever else. And I'm just concerned that they could lose two very important rights that we have in this country.
Mr. Danielson, there's a really bright line, I believe.
I'm sorry, I don't hear very
There's
well.
a really bright line between all of the things that you described, which I happen to concur with greatly, which is the advocacy, the speaking out, the involvement, between that and actually circulating a petition and taking a leadership position, which is yet to be defined. But those two things, I think, there's a bright line. So we're not saying, she's not asking whether or not she could be involved. She's asking whether or not she can carry a petition. So it's a very, very narrow request, and all of the things that you suggest, I share the same fear, but they're not relevant.
Well, I see limiting her ability to carry a petition is similar to taking away her voter ID. I mean, you're saying that this is a First Amendment issue to carry a petition. If you are a legal voter, you can carry in the state of South Dakota a petition. You're saying the potential is being said here that just because she holds an office, that she has no control over the clerk, that she shouldn't be allowed to carry a petition to gather signatures. Now, I would have one comment, and this is a judgment for Councilor Neitzer. Whether he signs a petition, whether he carries a petition is another issue, because he specifically said that he has the hiring and firing capability of the city clerk and the city staff who would be judging these. If it were me in that position that Councilor Neitzer has, I would step aside.
As a body.
Well, but Councilor Neitzer, as chair of the operations committee, he has that direct responsibility over the clerk. I would question the ethics of the person in that job touching a petition, because you have to keep that separation.
I have more questions.
Ross? Want to hear?
I
Questions? Thank you, Mr. Danielson. Appreciate your testimony. Anyone else in attendance who wishes to address this body? Mr. Stehly, anything further you wish to add before we begin our discussion here?
Just in reference to our city clerk, Tom Greco, and his procedural vetting of these signatures. I've been through 2 petition drives, and I do think it is a black and white situation. And whether I'm allowed to circulate petitions or not, I will tell you that as a citizen, I would demand that he has the highest standards, and as a city council person, I'm going to demand the same thing. That if they reject signatures, they have to legally explain why that's being done. We don't just let them throw things out on a whim. So I've been very pleased with how they've handled things since 2007 to 2006. I've been very appreciative of their helpfulness. But again, there's a standard of integrity that is going to have to be implemented whether I'm involved with that or not. And I think the public deserves to have that as well.
Mr. Stehly, thank you for bringing these 2 questions before us. I would suggest to my colleagues on the board here that we take one question at a time, and if that's agreeable. All right, everybody? And ask City Attorney to begin with, based on what we've heard today, is there, what further would he add regarding question number 1 and prior opinions as well as statutes?
I don't really have anything to add. I think you've touched all the various, I think the facts have been brought out. I think the law we discussed ahead of time, you know, one comment that left to mind, and Member Follett brought it up, but talking about speech, which of course is a First Amendment piece. I mean, you've differentiated some of that. Just because I have a duty, I think, to the city at large and to every, as the city attorney, there's a state statute that addresses this, and it's in the context of expenditure of public funds, because the city is limited, any municipal government is limited in advocating one side or another on these, or dedicating resources. Now, the city is allowed to use funds to educate the public. The statute, by the way, is SDCL 12-27-20. But I think it's just important, generally speaking, that the public be aware that that limitation on government funds being spent to advocate for one position or another is not construed. It says this section may not be construed to limit the freedom of speech of any officer or employee of the state or any political subdivision who's speaking in the officer's or employee's personal capacity. So when it comes to a personal capacity, I just want to ensure that when we look at the questions posed, that this is the Board of Ethics. We're not making legal rulings on that, but since that was brought up in the testimony, there is state law on point that, again, there really isn't advice attached to that. It's an awareness and information for the board as part of its consideration.
Let's open up for discussion on the board. And maybe we could talk also about the relevancy or irrelevancy of opinion 07-1.
So I'm going to go back to my initial question, the role of the city council in amending the charter. And I got good clarification on that, so I appreciate that. That in this case, and I'm going to go into that a little bit, that's just not an option. That was made clear. However, the request for advisory opinion does not mention, it just says in general to amend the charter. So there's no mention of to amend the charter how, or to amend the charter to say this instead of to say that. It's very general. Because in my mind, in some cases, the city council's own process to amend the charter would be appropriate. In other cases, it would not, and this doesn't distinguish between those. It's more general. You hear what I'm saying? I'm struggling. with that. It wasn't a specific request to amend the charter to be different in this manner versus that. It's very general.
Great.
I see a real difference between the two questions. And remember, this is an advisory opinion, so whatever we happen to say does not bind you. It is simply advice and guidance. You can go off and do whatever you'd like. If someone files an ethics complaint subsequent to that, and we have given you advice that you shouldn't do it or you should, that's obviously going to be determinative. But it is not a ruling, it is advice. To me, the act of carrying the petition and the role of city clerk, all sorts of degrees of supervision, and whether it's cycle or the board, the body, all of those things considered, it seems to me that rises to at least the appearance of impropriety. So I would lean towards saying that carrying a petition is a very different question than the second leadership position. I have no problem, I think, with the leadership where my problem, the nexus of my problem is with the relationship between city council and the city clerk. And so that's my differentiation.
Sue Ross.
Well, I've been looking at a little different aspect. I have read and reread this advisory opinion 07-1 and canons 3 and 7, and I really struggle with it. I mean, the relevant sentence here is, however, it is the opinion of the board that the proposed act of collecting or gathering signatures on a petition would appear to be a violation of canons 3.3 and 7. They don't say why. And that, I have struggled with that, and I read them and I think, why is that a violation? And so I look at 7 and say, is that precedent for what we're doing now? I'm not sure if I had been here at that time, would I have seen it that way and concurred with an opinion that just said, it's our opinion that it's a violation.
Yeah, and I'm also struggling with that. I'm getting real specific about the language of the request, my right. So she's asking if she has the right. And I'm going to tag on to what you said, Greg, about this is an advisory opinion. Does she have the right? And if we say she does, that doesn't mean that somebody wouldn't come back after she circulates or leads and makes a complaint that she violated the ethics. And so that's what I'm struggling with. That does someone have the right is a relatively black and white question, but are we going to advise her based on what we think might happen to her if she does?
Again, the difference between the legal side of the law
right.
and the ethical side. Not everything that you have a right to do should be done. It's just so maybe perfectly legal. That doesn't mean you, quote, should, because of all of these things like the appearance of impropriety and things like that. So that's, again, that's the distinction I see between the law and the ethics rulings.
Can I ask, Greg, did I understand your comments correctly? It almost sounded like you were saying you were more comfortable answering yes to number 2, and you had more problem with the actual circulating petition. Did I understand you correctly? That is what you, okay.
Because your interpretation of leading would be, you'd be a spokesperson, you'd be advocating in public.
I don't think that I can see, I mean, I see some problems with it, but they may be perceived. The city clerk relationship bothers me to the point where I tend to say no. The other one, if I were there, I might make one determination about the appearance. You know, I'm not going to do that because people may think that it's not the right thing to do. Somebody else could perfectly well meet and come to another conclusion, and that's fine. But with the city clerk, I see that as a very different thing.
So the circulating petition is the one you're referring to,
Yep.
involving the city clerk?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So elaborate on that a little bit, Greg. Why do you see that as the appearance of impropriety?
Well, I can't decide whether or not someone's going to decide that someone else is going to decide that it's inappropriate, or that there's a conflict of interest, or there's something wrong. But the fact that there is a supervisory relationship between a person carrying a petition and the person to whom they submit that petition certainly raises again, we can say that's nonsense, we don't care about it, but it would certainly, I believe, has the potential to raise eyebrows. That is the appearance of impropriety. Someone may look at it that way.
We also heard testimony, though, that if you're going to run for city council, you have to circulate a petition to be a candidate. So what's the difference between circulating a petition for your own candidacy or circulating a petition for a revision of the city charter?
I'm not sure. I mean, that's a reasonable question. I don't know.
See, I think she has the right to do both things. So, again, going very technically by the language, does she have the right? I would say she has the right. She does so she's taking a risk then that someone might bring up the city clerk issue, or someone might say there's the appearance of a conflict of interest because a citizen, I think, oftentimes has a hard time separating Theresa Stehly, council member, from Theresa Stehly, citizen. And so if someone, again, if too many hypotheticals, the manner in which she goes about doing these things would be really, really critical to avoid being accused of unethical behavior, in my mind.
First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, 230 years old, thereabouts, makes it pretty clear she's got the right
Yeah, and that's her question.
petition the government for redress of grievances. So I don't think there's any question with the council. You don't have to give up your First Amendment rights because you're elected to office. I think it's an interesting distinction, Greg, between 1 and 2, that maybe there's less of a problem in perception with leading the drive, and there could be a perception of a conflict of interest in circulating a petition, certifying, that is, signing a petition, certifying that the signatures are legitimate. But there's not necessarily any illegality here we're ruling on. It's just it's the optics of it, and
Because depending on how she goes about doing this, we could be here again ruling on a complaint.
Correct.
I think it's very likely that we would.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we deal with item number 2, the right to lead a citizen petition to amend the charter.
all right. I should offer a motion.
I'm going to almost wish it didn't say to amend the charter, just to lead a petition, but we've already had that question. So I'm going to move that we answer number 2 affirmatively. Yes, you have that right.
Is there a second to that motion?
I would say.
Okay. Discussion on that motion. Do we need to clarify in any way what it means to lead a petition drive?
I don't think so.
Any other members feel we need to further clarify that? Okay. Any further discussion? City Attorney, any further guidance on that?
got the law, you've got the ethical guidelines, you know. The board's just-
So have a roll call vote on that, please.
Sue Roust,
Yes.
Jack Marsh,
Yes.
Claire Follett,
Yes,
Wanda Harris.
Yes.
It's unanimously approved. Let's go back to question number 1. Mr. LaFollette, do you have a suggestion on that?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move regarding question number 1, that we answer no, and we refer again back to 7-1. I don't find that the facts and circumstances here are sufficiently different to change the decision of a prior group, and I don't find that decision improper. So I move that we answer question number 1 in the negative.
So you're saying, I think would need to spell that out a little bit more, Mr. LaFollette, because you're saying she does not have a right.
Well, I'm going to say that we're not telling her she doesn't have the right.
And I think we need to, could we say that? Could we say she does have the right, however, we advise.
That's exactly what we're doing, because it is
Yeah.
an advisory
Right,
opinion.
right.
So-
She does have the right, however, we would advise her to be aware of the precedent, be aware of the appearance of impropriety, be aware of a potential conflict with the relationship with the city clerk. Yeah,
Would you be open to a friendly amendment on that?
Well, if I may, I want to make sure that that the Board of Ethics is not defining rights as established by the Constitution of the United States.
yeah, I'm just trying to answer the question as it was asked.
And that's where I don't know that the board should get hung up on rights, because this isn't the Board of Rights, this is the Board of Ethics. And so when you look at the ruling in 2007, 07-1, if you look at that as a precedent and you're saying we're abiding by that, you need to discuss whether the proposed behavior is a violation of those canons or not. And it sounds, you've got your motion on the table to
We do not have a motion on the table yet, because it hasn't been seconded.
Okay, well, you proposed a motion. And so that one identified violations of those canons. It sounds like you are stating that the proposed behavior, basically recognizing this as precedent, because when it comes to decisions regarding rights, that can be problematic. Look at this, so if you look at it as those are violations of those canons, which is law that we've discussed, it's a law of the city of Sioux Falls, it's not of the state, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I would advise as far as the specificity of the motion, so you can record that decision. I understand the concerns about the rights and getting hung up on that language, but.
We're not going to opine on rights, we're going to mention rights. So
Do you want to frame a new motion?
I move that relative to question number 1, we advise the petitioner that she not carry a citizen petition to amend the charter based on the precedent of opinion 7-1.
There's a second to that motion. There's a second to that motion.
Then we're going to need another motion.
The motion that dies for lack of a second. Would any other member of the board wish to put forward a motion for consideration? A substitute motion, or maybe, Sue, you could.
Well, maybe just to
offer
be-
your concerns about that.
Well, maybe
that
just to
motion.
be more specific in calling out some sections of Canon 3. So a city member should avoid impropriety in the appearance of impropriety. I would go along with that, just calling that out more specifically, because like Sue said about this opinion, it doesn't have enough meat to it for me to just refer to it and say, yep, it's precedent, let's go with that. But if we advise against this because we see that per Canon 3, there is the appearance of impropriety, I would concur.
Would you like to offer a
I would-
substitute motion?
I would offer that as a substitute motion,
You want to restate that?
capture that again, so.
Carrie's desperately trying to figure out what it's going to say.
Yeah, trying to figure out where you're at and what.
You realize that the exact wording of the ruling, we will turn to the city attorney's office to help us with the exact ruling of the opinion, all right? But they're trying to capture the spirit of what we are proposing today. They being the city attorney's office.
So, on the question of the right to, we're on the right to circulate, correct? Yeah. We would advise that we would advise against that because this may have the appearance of impropriety. This activity may have the appearance of impropriety, and this activity may appear to be a conflict of interest because of the relationship with the city clerk
And the city council.
and the city council.
Is there a second to that motion?
Does that also mention the precedent on it from 7-1?
And we can put that in there too, as well as the fact that this canon has been,
Expanded.
yeah, in a previous opinion.
Okay. Friendly amendment. Is there a second to the?
Carrie's motion.
I'm not sure that I caught all of it. I don't know if you did as well, but do you mind if I read back?
Please
and
do,
we
yeah.
can maybe
Yeah, please do,
you can
yeah.
fill in what you've got. So I've got, we would advise against.
If I can,
Yeah.
it is you state an opinion. They're requesting an advisory opinion, so I would say it is the board's opinion.
Mhm.
Okay.
So it is the board's opinion to advise against the action in number 1, because this may have the appearance of impropriety, and this activity may have the appearance of impropriety in regard, this is where I was losing you, with regard to
The relationship between the
relationship.
city council and the city clerk's office.
Okay.
Mr. Coit, does
Yeah.
that give you enough to go on for
I just-
crafting the opinion?
I just want to make sure we have the board's opinion so we can reduce it to writing.
And the board relies on precedent of 7-1.
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Mr. Ross?
I would be voting against this motion. One thing that really troubles me is back to the question of how is this different than a sitting council member circulating a petition for their own reelection? I don't see any difference there. And they have to do that. So why is circulating, why is the subject matter of the petition lead it to have the appearance of impropriety? I cannot answer that question.
I would answer that by saying, I think to a citizen, I'm thinking in my own position as kind of an average citizen, I think it's obvious when a candidate is circulating a petition that they're the candidate and they have to circulate the petition. I think if it's another issue, it becomes more cloudy to the average person if they're representing themselves as a citizen or if they're representing themselves as some authority figure in city government. And that's the distinction I make. So I think it's a good argument to put out there, but I think the average citizen will say, well, obviously you have to circulate a petition to run for office. But the other one, that's where I think, again, at my own self as an average citizen, I could be confused as to the, are you doing this as a city council member or as a position of authority in government and therefore I should just go along with this, or are you truly acting as the average citizen just like me? That's the distinction I'm making.
I think there is both a difference and a distinction. I appreciate what you said. So I was thinking of what would the decision be, Sue, if there's something in the middle of those two, you know, the one that's being requested in circulating your own petition. We're about circulating a petition for another council member running for re-election. So that's kind of in the middle, and, you know, I would be less inclined, like Wanda said, that I think citizens may kind of raise an eyebrow, but they, yeah, that's, you know, I see that. But once you're over the issue side, I see a difference.
I think we're getting into hypotheticals here. You know, what you said is how would you be perceived? I think a large part of that is how do you present yourself? You know, if Councilor Stehly were to circulate a petition and make it clear to everyone she asks to sign it, I am not doing this as a city council member, I'm doing this as, this is my personal opinion. And if she did it and came out and implied in some way, you know, I'm a council member and I think this is right and I think you should follow it because I know more about government than you do, I could see that being an ethics complaint that's right back here. But that would give us something concrete to rule on. I think there's a little bit of just speculation involved here at this point. And once again, going back to 7 and following the precedent of 7, there's no justification in 7. They just said, you know, we find it is improper. Why? Well, they said because canons 3 and 7, I'm having trouble. You know, I suppose we're hanging our hats on the appearance of impropriety.
Exactly. That's the judgment. That's the difference between ethics and law. That's the judgment.
You know.
You're not, in your motion, you're not saying that there is a conflict of interest. You're not saying there is impropriety. You're saying that
There could be the appearance of. There could be the appearance of. And we'll be right back here addressing a complaint. And so we're advising this. And again, maybe I'm being too high.
Question.
Well, the board's been loath to decide hypotheticals, so that's a concern. And I would just remind the board, there's a full question. You know, this isn't about circulating. You don't get to opine on any types of petitions. This is a petition regarding amending the charter. And so that's one thing. I'm just trying to keep the board away from deciding hypotheticals. Instead, you gotta, that's, as we try to record this, we're talking about the question at hand. Because otherwise, well, hey, you're trying to stay away from hypotheticals. You know, reduce that to writing precedent issues. So.
And actually, this question is significantly narrower than the precedent set in 7.1, which just says the act of collecting or gathering of signatures on a petition. It doesn't say
What kind of petition?
Defined, it just says a petition. So this is narrower.
Which could have included circulating your own petition to run.
Mr. Chairman, I call for the question.
Question's been called. Carrie, you want to read the motion again?
I'll certainly give it a shot.
All right.
All right. Okay, it is the board's opinion that we advise against the activity in number 1, as this may have the appearance of impropriety, and this activity may have the appearance of impropriety in the relationship between the city council and city clerk. And the board relies on the precedent of 7-01.
Does that accurately capture your motion? Okay, Carrie, let's do a roll call vote on that, please.
All right, Stu Roust,
No.
Jack Marsh,
Yes.
Greg LaFollette,
Yes?
Wanda Harris.
Yes.
All right, we have 3 yeses, 1 no.
We now need a separate motion to authorize the city attorney's office to draw up the exact language of the opinion. And then it'll be subject to my review and my signature as the chair. Do we have a the language of that motion?
I have it.
You
It's
have
the
it?
one from last time, right?
Yes, yep.
Was, you have to.
I make a motion to authorize the board's legal advisor, Stacy Cloister, to draft an advisory opinion consistent with the discussions and motion of the board, and to authorize the board chair to both approve and sign the opinion as drafted on behalf of the board.
Second to the motion.
Second.
Second by Mr. LaFawn. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right. Next item, the meeting has still not been adjourned, so we'd like to maintain order, please. This is the time of the agenda where any member of the public can offer input on any matters that would be relevant to this board. Is there any testimony to be given?
Bruce Danielson. I appreciate the vote that just happened. I have a real issue, and maybe we'll have to find a way to bring this back to the board, because Sue Rouse was absolutely correct. The ruling that you just gave said that those council members that were here, it could be construed they couldn't carry their own petitions. They couldn't carry a petition for anything. They have that right to carry a petition, and if it has an ethical issue with this board, we may have to bring it back. But personally, I would be encouraging anybody and everybody in the city of Sioux Falls, including elected officials, to carry this petition and any other petition, because you've just set yourself up for, another one of these visits. Because in the view of this, and the constitutional view of this, you're just telling them they don't have a right to do this. So I just wanted to, thank you for your time, and it was a great discussion, and actually I rather enjoyed it. Thank you.
Any other members of the public wishing to provide any input to the board?
Move for adjournment?
Councilor Stehly?
No, not so fast.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't have a chance to get up again, but when I asked for you to, leading a petition drive, I'm talking about circulating petitions. I've led petition drives in the past. I was organizing, circulating, it was the whole package deal. So I'm not sure what you were thinking of when you said that I could do that. I mean, I think there was a misunderstanding. And as I go forward to the public, because you're right, I mean, I see you're putting the threat of an ethics violation on my head. And I'm very aware that that would happen, because I have enemies out there. I get it. But I want you to clarify for me, please, what I can do now as leading a petition drive. What does that mean to you?
Well, I just want to point out that it would have been very helpful for me in the question to amend the charter to be more specific about why you felt like this was your only avenue, that you couldn't go through the other routes. I think that would have been very helpful for me. But I would point to what our city attorney said, that we're not determining whether or not you have the right to do something. So you have the right to do something. I think you asked us for advice, for an advisory opinion, and it was just that.
But I want to know what you're meaning when you say I can lead a petition. What does that intend? What does that?
I think because the request was framed in two separate questions. One was circulate petition, sign and circulate a petition.
Right.
Very specific. The other was lead,
right,
which did not occur to me that these were not mutually exclusive. So the way I looked at it, I think the board all talked about was they'll lead a drive. You can do whatever you want. You put a sign in your car, you can run around, you can talk to them, you can do whatever you want. You just can't circulate a petition.
Good.
It was because of the issue with the city clerk. That's in the motions.
So it is okay, thank you for clarifying. If I were to give people petitions to pass without, I mean, I can be promoting this, I mean, in your opinion, that's going to be okay. If I'm promoting it, I'm injecting energy into it, as long as my name isn't going to appear on any petitions being turned in your opinion, I'm safer.
And we're providing you that guidance.
Right, but what you say is recorded as a public document. I mean, this is going to, people will look at it and they will use what you say. So that's, if you're saying, Theresa, watch out, you're going to be back here again for an ethics violation, which was said several times, inferred that could happen. You know, that's.
Let's be clear, we are not saying that if you proceed with citing a petition that you're necessarily going to be found in violation of our code of ethics. We're simply saying, we advise you not to do that because of the appearance.
I get it, but you're also saying, hey, it's okay if you want to be, I love what you just said, the definitions that I can be embracing, supporting, helping, moving around, but just don't you, and I hope I can sign it too myself, but do not hold one of those things for someone else to sign. I get it, and I won't.
We provide.
And as I told the Argus leader, I'm not a fool. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any further comments from the public? Okay. Move for adjournment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say the same.